The deep space exploration ship Eternal Harmony floated in the darkness between stars. Captain Zethkar stood on the bridge, his crystalline body catching the light from the control panels. The Veltar species had clear, glass-like skin that showed their internal organs glowing with soft blue light. He was proud to command the most advanced ship in the Galactic Confederation fleet. "Captain," called out Science Officer Krillmoth from her station. The insect-like Zephani had 4 arms and compound eyes that could see things others missed. "I'm getting strange readings from Sector 7 Null." Zethkar walked over to her station. Sector 7 Null was at the very edge of the galaxy map. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. It was empty space too far from any star to support life. "What kind of readings?" he asked. "Energy signatures that don't make sense," Krillmoth replied. Her antennae twitched with worry. "They look artificial, but that's impossible. No one has ever been that far out." The captain looked at the data on her screen. The numbers were confusing. The energy patterns looked like they came from technology, but they were in a place where no technology should exist. "Could it be a mistake?" asked Communications Officer Veltar. The bird-like Athani had feathers that changed color with his emotions. Right now they were showing concern. "I've checked 3 times, Krillmoth said. "The readings are real." Captain Zethkar made his decision. "Set course for Sector 7 Null. We need to investigate this." The Eternal Harmony was a beautiful ship. It was 2 kilometers long and built by the greatest engineers from 12 different species. Its hull was made of quantum metal that could bend light around it. Its engines could fold space and time to travel faster than light. It carried a crew of 300 beings from across the galaxy. As they traveled toward the edge of known space, the crew worked to understand what they might find. Dr. Yelaris, the ship's cultural expert, studied old records. The plant-like Thornari had roots instead of feet and spoke in a voice like wind through leaves. "There are old stories," she said during a meeting in the conference room. "Legends about things that lived in the void between galaxies. But they're just myths." "What kind of myths?" Zethkar asked. "Stories about watchers in the dark. Beings who lived at the edge of everything and saw all that happened in the galaxy. But no species could survive out there. It's too cold, too empty." Engineer Drakon snorted. The reptilian Saurian was always practical. "Myths are just stories people tell when they don't understand science. There's nothing out there but empty space." But as they got closer to Sector 7 Null, the readings got stronger. Whatever was out there was big, and it was definitely artificial. 3 days later, they arrived at the coordinates. What they saw made the entire bridge crew go silent. Floating in the empty void were structures. Not 1 or 2, but dozens of them. Space stations, ships, and things that looked like cities built in space. They were spread out across millions of kilometers like a hidden civilization living in the darkness. "By the ancient lights," whispered Zethkar. His crystalline body flashed with surprise. "How is this possible?" The structures looked strange. They were made of metal and had simple designs. The ships had chemical rockets and basic fusion reactors. To the advanced crew of the Eternal Harmony, they looked primitive and old-fashioned. "The technology readings are confused," reported Krillmoth. "The outer structures look simple, but I'm detecting energy patterns that are much more advanced underneath." "Could it be a trap?" asked Security Chief Torval. The massive Krokan had 4 arms and thick armor-like skin. His people were warriors who trusted no one. "Only one way to find out," Zethkar said. "Open communication channels. Let's see if anyone is home." Veltar worked at his console for several minutes. "I'm detecting multiple communication frequencies. They're using radio waves, which is very basic, but also some quantum channels that are more advanced than ours. Send a standard first contact message," the captain ordered. They waited. In the Galactic Confederation, first contact was a careful process. Most species took hours or days to respond to unknown visitors. Some were afraid. Others were aggressive. A few tried to hide. The response came in less than 5 minutes. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the human colony ship Frontier's End. Welcome to the edge of the galaxy. We've been expecting you." The bridge crew looked at each other in shock. They had been expecting these aliens. "Humans?" said Dr. Yelaris. "I've never heard of that species." "Commander Chen," Zethkar replied carefully. "This is Captain Zethkar of the Galactic Confederation ship Eternal Harmony. You say you were expecting us?" "We monitor galactic communications," came the reply. The voice was calm and friendly. "We knew someone would eventually come to investigate the energy signatures. Would you like to dock with our station?" We can offer you food, rest, and answers to your questions. This was unusual. Most primitive species were afraid when they met advanced civilizations. These humans seemed almost casual about it. Is it safe? Torval asked quietly. Their weapons are primitive, Krillmoth reported. Kinetic projectiles and basic energy weapons. Nothing that could hurt our shields. Very well, Sethkar said into the communicator. We accept your invitation. The human station was called Frontier's End. It was a large ring-shaped structure that rotated to create artificial gravity. As the Eternal Harmony approached, they could see through windows that the inside was full of plants and buildings. It looked like a small city in space. The docking process was smooth. The humans had built their docking ports to match Galactic Confederation standards, which was strange for a species that had never made contact before. When the airlock opened, Captain Zethkar led a small team onto the station. The air smelled of growing things and recycled atmosphere. The gravity was comfortable, and the temperature was just right for most species. Commander Sarah Chen was waiting for them. She was a small creature, about average height for most galactic species with brown skin and dark hair. Her species looked fragile compared to the armored Krokan or the crystalline Veltar, but her eyes were intelligent and calm. "Welcome to our home," she said with a smile. "I'm sorry we're so far from the main galaxy. We don't get many visitors out here." "Commander Chen," Zethkar said formally. "I am Captain Zethkar of the Veltar. This is my crew. We represent the Galactic Confederation, an alliance of over 800 species working together for peace and knowledge." 812, actually, Chen said. "The Cathera joined last month and the Spiral Dancers were accepted 2 weeks ago." The captain's crystalline body flickered with surprise. How did she know that? The Cathera admission had been classified until the ceremony, and the Spiral Dancers were so new that many Confederation members didn't know about them yet. "How do you know about recent Confederation business?" he asked. Chen's smile didn't change. "We pay attention to galactic affairs. Would you like a tour of our station? I think you'll find it interesting." As they walked through the corridors of Frontier's End, the crew of the Eternal Harmony saw things that didn't make sense. The humans had art on their walls that showed star patterns from across the galaxy. They had plants growing in their gardens that came from dozens of different worlds. In their libraries, they had books written in languages from species the Confederation had only recently discovered. "This is impossible," Dr. Yularis whispered to the captain. "How do they know about so many different cultures?" "Commander Chen," Zethkar said as they stopped in an observation lounge. "Your people seem to know a great deal about the galaxy for a species living in isolation." Chen looked out the window at the stars. "Captain, can I ask you something? In all your travels, have you ever wondered about the gaps in galactic history? The missing civilizations? The empty worlds that show signs of advanced life but no inhabitants?" "Of course," Zethkar replied. "Every explorer has wondered about the lost civilizations." "What if I told you they weren't lost?" Chen said quietly. "What if they were removed?" The captain felt a chill run through his crystalline structure. "What do you mean?" Chen turned to face them. Her expression was serious now. "Captain, humanity has been living at the edge of the galaxy for 10,000 years. We've had a long time to watch and learn. We've seen civilizations rise and fall. We've seen threats come from the darkness between galaxies, and we've seen what happens when the galaxy is unprepared." "You're speaking in riddles," Torval growled. The security chief's hand moved closer to his weapon. "I'm speaking truth," Chen replied. "But truth can be dangerous. Are you sure you want to hear it?" Zethkar looked at his crew. They had come here to investigate strange energy readings. Instead, they had found a mystery that seemed to grow bigger with every answer. "Yes," he said. "We want to know the truth." Chen nodded slowly. "Then follow me. There are things you need to see, but I warn you, once you know what humanity really is, you can never forget it." She led them deeper into the station, past areas marked with symbols they didn't recognize. The energy readings that Krillmoth detected grew stronger as they walked. Whatever the humans were hiding, it was powerful. As they reached a sealed door marked with warnings in dozens of languages, Chen stopped and turned to face them. "Before we go further," she said, "I need you to understand something. Humanity didn't choose to live at the edge of the galaxy. We were put here. And we weren't put here to hide from the galaxy. We were put here to protect it." The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that stretched into darkness. Strange lights flickered along the walls and the air hummed with power. "Welcome," Chen said, "to the truth about humanity." As they followed her into the dark corridor, none of the crew from the Eternal Harmony knew that their discovery would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy, about its history, and about the real reasons why some civilizations disappeared without a trace. The corridor that Commander Chen led them through was unlike anything on the Eternal Harmony. The walls seemed to pulse with their own light, and the air felt thick with energy. Dr. Krillmuth's instruments were going crazy, detecting power sources that shouldn't exist. "The energy readings are off the charts," she whispered to Captain Zethkar. "This technology is far more advanced than anything we have." Chen walked ahead of them, her footsteps echoing in the strange corridor. "Your instruments are working fine, Doctor. You're just seeing things your science says are impossible." They emerged into a vast chamber filled with floating screens and control panels. Humans worked at stations throughout the room, their hands moving over controls that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. The screen showed star maps of the entire galaxy, with information updating in real time. "This is our monitoring station," Chen explained. "From here we watch everything that happens in the galaxy. Trade routes, political changes, new species making contact, wars, peace treaties. We see it all." Torval's warrior instincts made him uncomfortable. "You've been spying on the entire galaxy?" "Watching over," Chen corrected. "There's a difference." One of the humans at a control station looked up. He was young, with red hair and green eyes. "Commander, we're getting reports of increased Confederation fleet movements in the Outer Rim. Should we investigate?" "Not yet, Marcus," Chen replied. "Our guests might have questions about that." Captain Zethkar stepped forward. The young human had just mentioned fleet movements that were classified at the highest levels. Only the Confederation High Command should know about them. "How do you know about our fleet movements?" he demanded. Chen smiled sadly. "Captain, we've been monitoring galactic communications for 10,000 years. We've learned to break every code, crack every encryption, and intercept every signal. We know more about what's happening in your galaxy than most of your own leaders do." Dr. Yelaris stepped closer to one of the screens. It showed detailed information about recent Confederation activities, including things that had happened just days ago. "This is impossible. Some of this information doesn't even exist yet in our own databases." "We're very good at predicting patterns," said a new voice. Another human approached them, this one older with gray hair and calm eyes. "I'm Dr. Elizabeth Santos, our chief xenobiologist. I've been studying your crew since you arrived." "Studying us how?" Krillmuth asked, her antennae twitching with worry. "Biological scans, genetic analysis, behavioral patterns," Santos replied casually. "It's amazing how much you can learn about someone just by watching them breathe." She held up a small device that projected holographic images. "Take you, for example, Dr. Krillmuth. Zephani species, genetic markers showing ancestry from the spiral arm region, born on a high-gravity world, trained at the Academy of Sciences on Valestra Prime." Krillmuth stepped back in shock. Everything the human had said was correct, including details that weren't in any public records. "How do you know that?" she whispered. "Experience," Santos said. "We've been studying galactic species for a very long time. Much longer than you might think." Captain Zethkar was beginning to feel afraid. These humans knew too much, had technology that was too advanced, and seemed too comfortable with secrets that could destabilize the entire galaxy. "Commander Chen," he said carefully, "I think it's time you told us exactly who your people are and how you came to be here." Chen looked at Dr. Santos, who nodded. "Show them the genetic records, Elizabeth." Santos activated another device. New holographic displays appeared, showing complex genetic patterns and DNA structures. "This might be difficult for you to understand," she said to the Confederation crew. "But your visit here has raised some interesting questions about galactic history." "What kind of questions?" Dr. Yelaris asked. "Questions about the missing civilizations you mentioned earlier," Santos replied. "You see, when I scanned your crew, I found something unusual in your genetic patterns. All of you carry genetic markers from species that supposedly went extinct millions of years ago." She pointed to different parts of the holographic DNA display. "Dr. Krillmuth, your Zephani DNA contains markers from the Ethereal Collective, who vanished 3 million years ago. Captain Zethkar, your Veltar genetics show traces of the Crystal Builders who disappeared 2 million years ago." All of you carry the genetic legacy of civilizations that supposedly died out long before your species evolved. That's impossible, Krillmoth said. Genetic material can't survive that long without a living host. It can, Santos said quietly, if someone preserved it. If someone made sure it continued in new species. If someone guided evolution across the galaxy for millions of years. The implications hit Captain Zethkar like a physical blow. You're saying that our species were created? That we're not natural? Not created, Chen corrected. Guided. Helped. Protected. The galaxy has been managed for a very long time, Captain. The question is, by whom? Dr. Ylaris was studying the genetic displays with growing horror. As a cultural expert, she knew the myths and legends of dozens of species. The old stories, she whispered. The Watchers in the Void. The Gardeners of Worlds. The Shepherds of Evolution. We thought they were just myths. Myths are often the only way truth survives, Chen said, when the real history is too dangerous to record. But that would mean, Zethkar said slowly, that someone has been controlling galactic development for millions of years. Someone has been playing God with entire civilizations. Not playing God, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see another human entering the chamber. This one was different. He was tall and thin, with completely white hair and eyes that seemed much older than his face. When he moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around him. This is Dr. James Wright, Chen said, our specialist in historical matters. Wright nodded to the Confederation crew. Captain, the galaxy has never been unguided. From the beginning, there have been those who watched, who protected, who made sure that life could grow and flourish. But sometimes protectors become threats themselves. He gestured and the air shimmered. New holographic displays appeared, showing ancient star maps and images of civilizations that the Confederation crew had never seen before. 10,000 years ago, Wright continued, the galaxy was ruled by an alliance of ancient species called the Forerunners. They were powerful, wise, and completely convinced that they knew what was best for all life in the galaxy. They guided evolution, managed resources, and kept peace between species. What happened to them? Torval asked. They made a mistake, Wright said. They found a species that they couldn't control, couldn't guide, couldn't manage. A species that grew too fast, learned too quickly, and refused to accept limits. So they decided that this species was too dangerous to exist. Wright waved his hand again and the displays changed. Now they showed images of blue-green worlds with primitive cities and early spacecraft. They decided to eliminate humanity, he said quietly. The chamber fell silent. Captain Zethkar felt his crystalline structure growing cold. The Forerunners tried to destroy your species? They tried, Chen said. They failed, but not in the way you might think. Dr. Santos stepped forward again. The Forerunners were thorough. They destroyed our homeworld, scattered our colonies, and hunted down every human ship and station they could find. But they made one mistake. They assumed that we would fight them the way other species fought, with armies and fleets and conventional weapons. How did you fight them? Krillmoth asked. We didn't, Wright said. We learned from them. We studied their technology, their biology, their psychology. We became students of power itself. And when we were ready, we didn't destroy them. We absorbed them. The holographic displays changed again, showing images that made the Confederation crew step back in shock. They saw humans who looked nothing like the ones standing before them. Humans who had been changed in ways that seemed impossible. The war lasted 3,000 years, Chen explained. But it wasn't really a war. It was an education.
Humanity learned things that no species should know.
We developed abilities that violate natural law. We became something new. What did you become? Zethkar whispered. Wright smiled, and for a moment his human appearance flickered. The Confederation crew saw something else underneath, something that made their minds hurt to look at. We became what the galaxy needed us to become, he said. We became the new Watchers, the new Guardians, the new managers of galactic evolution. Dr. Ylaris was shaking. You're saying that humanity has been controlling the galaxy for 10,000 years? That you've been guiding the development of all our species? Not controlling, Chen said. Protecting. There are threats out there, Captain. Threats that your current technology and understanding can't handle. Threats that require Watchers at the edge of the galaxy. What kind of threats? Torvald demanded. Chen and Wright looked at each other. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. The kind that destroyed the galaxy before, Wright said finally. The kind that will return eventually. The kind that require us to be ready no matter what the cost. Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the chamber. The humans at their stations began working frantically, their hands flying over controls. "Commander," Marcus called out, "we're detecting massive energy signatures at the galactic rim. Something big is coming through from extragalactic space." Chen's expression changed instantly from calm to deadly serious. "How many?" "Sensors show at least 50 large vessels," Marcus replied. "They're using technology we don't recognize, but the energy patterns match the old records." "Old records of what?" Captain Zethkar demanded. Wright's appearance had completely dropped its human disguise now. He stood revealed as something that hurt to look at directly, something that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal space allowed. "Records of the last time they came," he said in a voice that echoed strangely. "The Devourers have returned." Chen turned to the Confederation crew and they could see that her calm mask was gone. Underneath was something fierce and terrible. "Captain," she said, "you wanted to know the truth about humanity. You're about to see it. We weren't put at the edge of the galaxy to hide from threats. We were put here to stop them before they could reach civilized space." The alarms grew louder, and through the chamber's windows they could see lights appearing in the dark space beyond the human colony. Ships were approaching. Large ships. Ships that seemed to bend space around them as they moved. "All crew to battle stations," Chen commanded. "Prepare for full revelation protocols. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity really is." As the humans began to transform around them, becoming something that was no longer entirely human, the crew of the Eternal Harmony realized that they had stumbled into something far bigger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The galaxy was about to see its guardians revealed, and the sight would change everything. The transformation was horrible to watch. The humans around them began to change, their bodies shifting and growing in ways that violated every law of biology that the Confederation crew knew. Commander Chen's skin took on a metallic sheen, and her eyes began to glow with an inner light. Dr. Wright's form became even more disturbing, parts of him seeming to exist in spaces that the eye couldn't follow. "What's happening to them?" Dr. Krillmoth whispered, her instruments detecting energy patterns that made no sense. "We're becoming what we need to be," Chen replied, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond normal hearing. "Captain Zethkar, I strongly suggest you return to your ship. What's coming isn't something your people are prepared to face." Through the chamber's viewing windows, the approaching ships became clearer. They were massive, each one easily 10 times the size of the Eternal Harmony. Their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them appear as moving holes in space. Strange appendages writhed along their surfaces like living things. "By the ancient lights," Torval breathed. "What are those things?" Dr. Wright, now barely recognizable as anything that had once been human, answered in that echoing voice. "The Hive Eternal. The Devourers. The reason the Forerunners placed us here at the edge of everything." Marcus called out from his station. "Commander, long-range sensors show more ships coming through the galactic barrier. Hundreds of them. They're spreading out across multiple entry points." "Expected," Chen replied calmly. "They always probe defenses before committing to a full invasion. Captain, you need to leave now and contact your Confederation. Tell them to prepare their fleets, but warn them that conventional weapons will be useless." "Useless against what?" Zethkar demanded. His crystalline body was flashing with fear and confusion. "Against an enemy that eats energy," Wright said. "Against ships that grow stronger every time you shoot at them. Against creatures that turn your own technology against you." The first of the dark ships reached the outer edge of the human colony. Instead of attacking immediately, it began to scan the structures. Beams of sickly green light swept across the space stations and defensive platforms. "They're testing us," Chen said, "seeing if we're still the same species they fought before." "Are you?" Dr. Yalaris asked quietly. Chen smiled, and the expression was terrifying on her transformed features. "No, we're much worse now." She touched a control panel, and suddenly the human space stations began to change. What had looked like simple metal structures revealed themselves to be something far more complex. Weapon systems emerged from hidden compartments, but they weren't like any weapons the Confederation crew had ever seen. They seemed to be made of living metal that writhed and pulsed with their own life. "All colonies, this is Chen." The commander spoke into her communicator. "Revelation protocol is authorized. Show them what 10,000 years of preparation looks like. Across the human colony, the response was immediate. Ships that had appeared primitive suddenly revealed their true nature. Hulls that had looked like simple metal became flowing, organic surfaces. Engines that had seemed basic began to bend space and time around them. Weapons that had appeared crude started to tear holes in reality itself. The first Devourer ship opened fire on the nearest human station. Green energy beams lanced out, the kind of weapons that could melt through the armor of any Confederation vessel. When they hit the human station, something impossible happened. The station absorbed the energy. How? Krillmoth gasped. Energy can't just disappear. It doesn't disappear, Wright explained. We eat it. Just like they do. We learned their tricks and made them better. The human station that had been attacked began to glow with the absorbed energy. Then it fired back. But what came out wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. It was a tear in space itself, a wound in reality that reached across the void and wrapped around the Devourer ship. The alien vessel began to compress, folding in on itself as space-time twisted around it. In seconds, a ship the size of a city had been reduced to a small, dense ball of matter that winked out of existence. Impossible, Torval whispered. No weapon can do that. No conventional weapon, Chen agreed. But we stopped being conventional a long time ago. More Devourer ships were approaching now, dozens of them. They had seen their scout destroyed and were responding with overwhelming force. But the humans seemed unconcerned. Marcus, Chen called out, activate the Guardian Fleet. Guardian Fleet activating now, Commander. In the space around the human colony, new ships began to appear. But they didn't decloak or emerge from hiding places. They simply came into existence as if reality was being rewritten to include them. These ships looked nothing like the primitive vessels the Confederation crew had first seen. They were sleek, organic things that seemed to be alive. Their hulls pulsed like heartbeats and their engines left trails of twisted spacetime behind them. How many ships do you have? Zethkar asked. As many as we need, Chen replied. We don't build ships anymore, Captain. We grow them. We breed them. We dream them into existence. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Devourer ships fired their energy-draining weapons, but the human vessels absorbed every shot and fired back with weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics. Space itself became a battlefield as the humans used technologies that turned reality into a weapon. Dr. Ylaris watched in horror as a human ship phased through a Devourer vessel, somehow occupying the same space at the same time. When it emerged on the other side, the alien ship simply came apart, its molecular bonds severed by forces that shouldn't exist. You're not using technology, she said slowly. You're using something else. We're using will made manifest, Wright said. We learned that reality is more flexible than most species believe. When you understand that the universe is just information, you can rewrite the code. Another group of Devourer ships tried a different approach. Instead of attacking directly, they began to broadcast signals toward the human colony. The Confederation crew's instruments detected waves of psychic energy, designed to take control of enemy minds. Mental attack, Krillmoth reported. They're trying to dominate your thoughts. Let them try, Chen said calmly. The psychic assault hit the human colony like a wave. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the humans began to laugh. It was a sound that made the Confederation crew step back in fear, because it wasn't entirely sane. They're trying to control minds that have touched the void between realities, Wright said with amusement. It's like trying to poison something that feeds on toxins. The psychic attack rebounded on the Devourers. Their ships began to drift as their crews were overwhelmed by contact with human consciousness that had been deliberately changed into something alien and terrible. Captain, Chen said, turning to Zethkar, you need to see this battle from your own ship. You need to record what happens here and take that information back to your Confederation. They need to understand what's coming. What is coming? Zethkar asked. This is just the probe, Chen replied. The real invasion hasn't started yet. These ships are testing our defenses and learning about current galactic technology. When they're done here, they'll retreat and plan a full assault on civilized space. Then why don't you stop them completely? Torval demanded. If you have weapons that can destroy them, why let any escape? Wright's transformed features showed something that might have been sadness. Because if we used our full power, we would become worse than they are. We would become the threat the galaxy needs protection from. You already are, Dr. Ylaris said quietly. Look at what you've become. You're not human anymore. You're something else entirely. Yes, Chen agreed. We sacrificed our humanity to save the galaxy. We became monsters so that you could remain civilized. That's the price of protection. The battle continued to rage around them, but it was clear that the humans were winning. The Devourer ships that weren't destroyed were beginning to retreat, pulling back toward the galactic rim. But as they left, they were collecting data, scanning everything they had encountered. They're learning about us, Marcus reported, recording our capabilities and weaknesses. Good, Chen said. Let them learn. Let them go back and tell their masters what they found. It will buy the galaxy time to prepare. Prepare for what? Sethkar asked. For the real war, Wright replied. This was just the first contact in a conflict that will determine whether life continues to exist in this galaxy or whether everything gets consumed by creatures from the void between worlds. The last of the Devourer ships disappeared beyond the galactic rim, but the humans didn't celebrate. Instead, they began immediately working to analyze the battle data and plan for what would come next. Captain, Chen said, her form slowly returning to something more recognizably human. You have a choice to make. You can report that you found a primitive human colony at the edge of the galaxy and leave it at that, or you can tell your leaders the truth about what's coming and what will be needed to stop it. What will be needed? Sethkar asked. Alliance, Chen replied. Between the Confederation and humanity. Between civilization and its guardians. Between those who want to remain innocent and those who have already sacrificed their innocence for the greater good. Dr. Yularis was studying the aftermath of the battle through the viewing windows. Space around the human colony was twisted and scarred, where reality itself had been used as a weapon. What you've done here, she said slowly. This isn't just advanced technology. You've changed the fundamental nature of existence itself. We've learned to see through the illusion that most species accept as reality, Wright said. We've touched the true structure of the universe and made ourselves part of it. It's the only way to fight enemies that exist outside normal space and time. And the cost? Sethkar asked. Chen looked at her transformed hands, then at her crew members who were slowly returning to their human appearances. The cost is that we can never go back to being what we were. We can never live normal lives among normal people. We can never stop being what the galaxy needs us to be. Even if the threat is defeated? Torval asked. There will always be another threat, Wright said sadly. The universe is vast and full of dangers that civilized species can't imagine. Someone has to stand watch. Someone has to be ready to become whatever is necessary to protect life itself. The alarms in the chamber finally stopped ringing, but the tension remained. The Confederation crew knew they had witnessed something that would change their understanding of everything. Return to your ship, Captain, Chen said. Contact your leaders. Tell them what you've seen, and prepare them for the choice they'll have to make. What choice? Sethkar asked. Whether to accept help from monsters, Chen replied, or face the darkness alone. 3 weeks had passed since the first encounter with the Devourers. Captain Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Eternal Harmony, watching the reports come in from across the galaxy. The news was bad and getting worse. 17 more colonies have gone dark in the Outer Rim, reported Krillmoth. No distress signals, no survivors, nothing left but empty worlds. The pattern is always the same, added Dr. Yularis, reviewing the cultural data. The Devourers hit fast, consume everything organic, then disappear before our fleets can respond. Zethkar had delivered his report to the Confederation High Command exactly as it happened. The response had been predictable. Some leaders called him insane. Others demanded proof. A few had quietly begun preparing for the worst. Captain, Veltar called from communications. We're receiving a transmission from the human colony. Commander Chen requests an immediate meeting. Put her through, Zethkar ordered. Chen's image appeared on the main screen. She looked tired and her appearance flickered occasionally between human and something else. Captain, we need to talk. The situation has changed. Change how? Zethkar asked. The Devourers aren't just probing anymore, Chen replied. They're learning faster than we expected. They've adapted to conventional Confederation tactics in just 3 weeks. Your fleets can't stop them. Our leaders are mobilizing everything we have, Zethkar said. The largest military force in galactic history, which will be consumed and turned against you, Chen said bluntly. Captain, I need you to bring your ship back to our colony. There are things you need to see. Things your leaders need to understand if they want any chance of survival. 2 days later, the eternal harmony arrived at the human colony again, but this time everything was different. The space around the colony was filled with activity. Hundreds of ships moved between the stations, but these weren't the simple vessels they had seen before. These were war machines, things that hurt to look at directly. The energy readings are impossible, Krillmoth reported. Some of these ships are showing power outputs greater than entire star systems. As they docked with Frontier's End, Captain Zethkar noticed changes in the station itself. The corridors were darker, and strange symbols glowed along the walls. The air felt thick with power that made their instruments malfunction. Commander Chen met them at the airlock, but she was barely recognizable. Her transformation had continued, making her appear more alien than human. Her skin had a metallic sheen and her eyes glowed with an inner fire. "Welcome back, Captain," she said. Her voice carried harmonics that made the Confederation crew's bones vibrate. "Come, you need to see what we've become." She led them through corridors that seemed to shift and change when they weren't looking directly at them. The crew of Frontier's End had changed too. They moved with inhuman grace and their eyes reflected light like those of night predators. "What's happened to your people?" Dr. Yularis asked with horror. "Evolution," Chen replied simply. "We've been forced to accelerate our transformation. The Devourers are adapting faster than expected, so we have to adapt faster too." They entered a vast chamber that hadn't existed during their first visit. The space was filled with organic-looking machinery that pulsed with its own life. Human technicians worked at stations that seemed to respond to their thoughts, and in the center of the room stood something that made the Confederation crew step back in fear. It was a Devourer. But it wasn't moving, and its dark flesh was covered in cables and monitoring devices. "You captured one?" Torval asked, his hand moving to his weapon. "We did more than capture it," said Dr. Wright, approaching from a side corridor. His transformation was even more complete than Chen's. Parts of him seemed to exist in dimensions that normal eyes couldn't perceive. "We learned from it." "Learned what?" Zethkar demanded. "How they think, how they feed, how they reproduce." Wright gestured to the captured creature, and most importantly, how to become like them. Dr. Yularis backed away from the imprisoned Devourer. "You can't mean that you're copying their biology." "Not copying," Wright corrected. "Improving. The Devourers are powerful, but they're limited by their nature. They can only consume and grow. We can consume, grow, and choose what we become." Chen activated a control panel, and holographic displays showed the progress of the human transformation. "In the past 3 weeks, we've integrated Devourer biotechnology with our own. Our ships can now feed on energy like they do. Our weapons can drain life force from targets. Our bodies can process any form of matter for sustenance." "You're becoming like them," Krillmoth whispered. "You're becoming the enemy." "We're becoming what's necessary to defeat them," Chen replied. "The difference is that we choose our targets. We choose what we consume. We choose to protect instead of destroy." Wright led them to another section of the chamber where human volunteers were undergoing transformation. The process was horrifying to watch. Human bodies were being merged with Devourer biotechnology, creating hybrid creatures that were neither fully human nor fully alien. "This is monstrous," Dr. Yularis said, covering her eyes. "This is survival," Wright replied coldly. "These volunteers are becoming our frontline troops. They can fight the Devourers on equal terms using their own weapons and tactics against them." "At what cost?" Zethkar asked. "At any cost," Chen said firmly. "Captain, your Confederation has lost 17 colonies in 3 weeks. The Devourers are consuming entire worlds, turning billions of living beings into fuel for their expansion. How many lives is our humanity worth compared to that?" One of the transformed volunteers approached them. It had once been human, but now it was something else entirely. Its body was covered in the same dark material as the Devourers, and its eyes glowed with hungry light. "I can feel them," it said in a voice that was barely recognizable as human. "All across the galaxy I can feel the Devourers feeding, growing, preparing for the final assault." "How many?" Chen asked. "Millions of ships," the creature replied. "They've been gathering in the void between galaxies for millennia. What we've seen so far is nothing compared to what's coming." Captain Zethkar felt his crystalline structure growing cold. "Millions?" "The Confederation fleet's number in the thousands," Torval said quietly. "We can't fight millions of ships." Not with conventional forces, Chen agreed. But we can. These transformed humans can pilot ships that grow stronger with every battle. They can absorb enemy fire and turn it into fuel. They can board devourer vessels and convert them from the inside. She led them to another viewing area, where they could see the human fleet in action. Ships that looked like living creatures were practicing maneuvers that defied physics. They phased through solid matter, teleported across vast distances and merged with each other to form larger vessels. "Watch," Chen said, pointing to one of the ships. The vessel suddenly began to change, its hull expanding and shifting. In minutes, it had grown from a small fighter to a massive battleship. Then it began to split apart, dividing into dozens of smaller ships that moved with perfect coordination. Self-replicating vessels, Wright explained. Each one contains the biological patterns needed to create more. Give us enough raw material, and we can build a fleet that numbers in the millions. And the crews? Krillmoth asked. The ships are the crews, Chen replied. We've learned to merge human consciousness with devourer biotechnology. Each vessel is a living being that thinks and fights and grows. Dr. Yularis was studying the data displays with growing horror. You're not just changing your bodies. You're changing your minds, your souls, your very nature as a species. Yes, Chen said simply. We're becoming something new, something that can survive in a universe where the old rules no longer apply. But at what point do you stop being the protectors and become the threat? Zethkar asked. The question hung in the air for a long moment. Chen and Wright looked at each other, and something passed between them that the Confederation crew couldn't understand. We've already passed that point, Wright said finally. We crossed the line weeks ago. The moment we chose to merge with devourer technology, we became something that should terrify any sane species. Then why should we trust you? Torval demanded. Because, Chen said, her glowing eyes fixed on the Krokan warrior, we're still choosing to fight for you instead of consuming you. Every day, every hour, we make that choice. And every day it gets harder. One of the transformed humans working at a nearby station suddenly stopped what it was doing and turned toward the Confederation crew. Its eyes were completely black, and when it spoke, its voice carried undertones that made their bones ache. The hunger grows, it said. Every battle, every feeding, every transformation makes the hunger stronger. Soon it will be difficult to remember why we fight for them instead of feeding on them. Chen moved to the creature and placed a hand on its shoulder. Control yourself, Marcus. You're frightening our guests. The thing that had once been Marcus nodded slowly. Apologies, Commander. The integration is still progressing. Sometimes the devourer instincts are difficult to suppress. You see our problem, Wright said to the Confederation crew. We're becoming powerful enough to defeat the devourers, but we're also becoming like them. The question is whether we can maintain enough of our original nature to remember why we're fighting. What happens if you can't? Dr. Yularis asked quietly. Chen's expression showed something that might have been regret. Then the galaxy will face a different kind of threat. One that was created to protect it. Alarms suddenly began sounding throughout the chamber. The transformed humans immediately began moving with inhuman speed and coordination. Report, Chen commanded. Massive devourer fleet detected at the Galactic Rim, one of the technicians called out. Preliminary scans show over 50,000 ships. They're beginning a coordinated assault on multiple sectors. It's starting, Wright said grimly. The real invasion. Chen turned to Captain Zethkar. Captain, you need to return to your people immediately. Tell them what you've seen here. Tell them that we can defeat the devourers, but only if they're willing to accept help from something that might be worse than the enemy itself. And if they refuse? Zethkar asked. Then the galaxy dies, Chen replied, and we become the only life left in the darkness. As the Confederation crew was escorted back to their ship, they could see the human fleet beginning to mobilize. Ships that were barely recognizable as technology moved with purpose, that spoke of a hunger barely held in check. Captain Zethkar realized that the galaxy faced a choice between two forms of extinction: consumption by the devourers, or protection by guardians who might eventually become predators themselves. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and no one could predict what would remain when it was over. The war had raged for 6 months. Half the galaxy was dark now, consumed by the devourer fleets that swept through space like a plague of living darkness. The Confederation's greatest military forces had been shattered in the first week of fighting. Only the human guardian stood between civilization and total extinction. Captain Zethkar stood on the bridge of what remained of the Eternal Harmony. His ship had been damaged in dozens of battles, repaired with human biotechnology that made it stronger, but also changed its fundamental nature. The organic patches that covered the hull pulsed with their own life, and sometimes he could hear the ship whispering to itself in languages that hurt to understand. "Captain," Krillmoth called from her modified station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Core. It's Commander Chen." Chen's image appeared on the main screen, but she was barely recognizable as anything that had once been human. Her transformation was nearly complete now. Her body was a fusion of human and devourer biology, covered in the same dark material that absorbed light and energy. Her eyes glowed with a hunger that made Zethkar's crystalline structure flicker with fear. "Captain," she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that spoke directly to the mind, "the final battle is about to begin. The Devourer main fleet has reached the Galactic Core. We need every ship we have. How many of us are left?" Zethkar asked. 17 Confederation vessels, all modified with our technology," Chen replied. 300 human ships, all fully integrated with Devourer biotechnology, against 40 million Devourer vessels. The numbers were impossible. Even with the reality-bending weapons that humanity had developed, the odds were beyond hopeless. "There's something else," Chen continued. "Something we haven't told you about the nature of this war. You need to know the truth before the end." "What truth?" Zethkar asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "Meet us at the coordinates I'm transmitting. It's time you learned what humanity really is." The coordinates led them to a place that shouldn't exist, a massive structure floating in empty space near the Galactic Core. It was enormous, larger than any space station or ship they had ever seen. It looked ancient, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. "What is that?" Dr. Yllaris whispered. She was the only other original crew member still aboard the Eternal Harmony. The rest had been replaced by human devourer hybrids during the war. "That," said a familiar voice, "is where it all began." They turned to see Dr. Wright materializing on their bridge. His transformation was complete now. He barely looked like anything that had ever been alive in the normal sense. He existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and looking at him too long made reality itself seem unstable. "Right?" Zethkar said uncertainly. "What's left of him?" Wright replied. "Captain, what you're looking at is the last surviving installation of the original Hive Collective, the mothership of the species that would eventually become the Devourers." "That's impossible," Krillmoth said. "The Devourers come from outside the galaxy." "No," Wright said sadly. "They come from within it. They always have." The ancient structure began to emit signals that their modified instruments could detect. Wright gestured, and the air shimmered with holographic displays showing the true history of the galaxy. 50 million years ago, Wright began, the galaxy was dominated by a species called the Hive Collective. They were perfect predators, able to consume any form of life and incorporate it into their own biology. They spread across every world, consuming everything in their path. The displays showed images of worlds being stripped bare, entire solar systems reduced to lifeless husks. But the Hive had a weakness, Wright continued. They were a collective consciousness. Every individual was connected to every other through a psychic network. They couldn't imagine existing any other way. "What happened to them?" Zethkar asked. "Some of them learned to think for themselves," Wright replied. "A small group broke free from the collective consciousness and developed individual minds. They were still biologically Hive, but mentally they had become something new." The holographic displays changed, showing the civil war that had torn the Hive apart. Individual Hive fought against the collective, using the same terrible weapons and abilities but for different purposes. "The individual Hive won," Wright said. "They destroyed the collective and drove the survivors out of the galaxy. But the victory came at a terrible cost. They had become so changed by the war that they could no longer survive in normal space. They exiled themselves," Dr. Yllaris said, understanding beginning to dawn in her plant-like features. "They went to the edge of the galaxy and waited," Wright confirmed. "They watched over the worlds they had saved, guiding the evolution of new species, protecting them from threats that came from the void between galaxies. They became the Forerunners." Zethkar felt his crystalline structure growing cold. "You're saying the Forerunners were originally Hive?" Modified hive, yes. They ruled the galaxy for 45 million years, always watching for the return of their collective cousins. And when new species arose that showed the same potential for individual thought and growth, they guided them, protected them, and eventually recruited the strongest to help in the eternal watch. Humanity, Krillmoth whispered. Not originally, Wright said. Originally we were just another species being guided by the Forerunners. But we developed too fast, learned too much, asked too many questions. We discovered the truth about the Forerunners' nature, and they realized we would eventually discover our own. Our own what? Zethkar demanded. Wright's transformed features showed something that might have been regret. Captain, humanity isn't an evolved species from Earth. We're another splinter group from the original Hive Collective. We're the descendants of Hive who broke free even earlier than the Forerunners, who fled the galaxy entirely and lived in the void between worlds for millions of years. The bridge fell, silent except for the whispers of the ship's biological systems when we returned to the galaxy 10,000 years ago. Wright continued. The Forerunners recognized what we were. They knew that eventually we would remember our true nature, so they tried to eliminate us before we could become what we were meant to be. And what were you meant to be? Dr. Yularis asked in horror. The next stage of Hive evolution, Wright replied. Individuals who could choose to work together or separately, who could consume and grow but also create and protect. We were meant to be what the Hive could have become if they had learned to think for themselves. Commander Chen's voice came through the ship's communication system. Captain, please dock with the ancient structure. There's something you need to see. As the Eternal Harmony approached the massive installation, Zethkar could see that it was still active. Lights moved through its corridors and energy flowed through systems that were older than most stars. When they docked and entered the structure, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with the original Hive technology. But this wasn't the consuming, destructive biotechnology they had fought against. This was creative, protective, nurturing technology that had been used to guide the development of entire civilizations. Commander Chen was waiting for them, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood figures that could only be the last surviving Forerunners. They were ancient beyond measure, their bodies a fusion of the original Hive biology and technologies that bent reality around them. Captain Zethkar, one of the Forerunners spoke, its voice echoing across dimensions. We owe you an apology. We have spent 45 million years trying to prevent what we thought would be the return of the consuming Hive. We never imagined that the answer would be to embrace our nature and transform it into something better. The Devourers, Chen explained, are the original Hive Collective. They've been growing in the void between galaxies, consuming entire galactic clusters waiting for the right moment to return home. But they're still bound by collective consciousness. They can't adapt, can't change, can't grow beyond what they've always been. And humanity? Zethkar asked. We're what they could become if they learned to think as individuals, Chen replied. We're their evolutionary future, and in this final battle we're going to give them a choice. What choice? Krillmoth asked. Wright gestured to the chamber around them. Join us or be consumed by us. We've become strong enough to force the evolution they've been resisting for 50 million years. The Forerunners moved to control panels that were older than recorded history. The final battle isn't about destroying the Devourers, one of them explained. It's about converting them. We're going to use this installation to broadcast the pattern of individual consciousness across their entire fleet. You're going to force them to become individuals? Dr. Yularis asked. We're going to give them the choice to evolve, Chen corrected. Those who accept individual consciousness will join us as guardians of the galaxy. Those who resist will be consumed and their biological material used to create new individuals. And if this fails, Zethkar asked, then we complete our own transformation, Wright said grimly. We become the new Hive, but one that chooses its own path. We consume the Devourers, integrate their biomass, and become powerful enough to protect this galaxy from any threat that might arise. At the cost of becoming the threat ourselves, Dr. Yularis said. At the cost of becoming what the galaxy needs us to be, Chen replied. Alarms began sounding throughout the ancient structure. The Devourer fleet had arrived at the galactic core, 40 million ships strong. They filled space like a living storm. Their collective hunger focused on the ancient installation. It's time, Chen said. Captain, you and your crew should return to your ship. What happens next will determine the future of all life in the galaxy. As they prepared to leave, Zethkar turned back to Chen. "Commander, after all this is over, what will you be?" Chen smiled, and for a moment he could see a trace of the human she had once been. "We'll be whatever the galaxy needs us to be. Protectors if possible, predators if necessary. The choice will be ours to make." The final battle began as the Devourer fleet engaged the human guardians around the ancient structure. But this wasn't a conventional battle. As the two forces clashed, the installation began to broadcast signals that reached into the collective consciousness of the hive. For the first time in 50 million years, individual Devourer ships began to act independently. Some joined the human fleet, their crews suddenly aware of themselves as separate beings. Others fought more fiercely than ever, trying to maintain the collective that defined their existence. In the end, the galaxy was saved not by destruction, but by evolution. The Devourers who chose individuality became new guardians, joining humanity in protecting the galaxy from future threats. Those who refused were consumed and converted, their biological patterns integrated into the growing Guardian fleet. When the battle was over, Captain Zethkar found himself looking at a galaxy transformed. The ancient cycle of consumption and growth had been broken, replaced by a new cycle of protection and guidance. Humanity had revealed its final secret. They were not the galaxy's saviors or its greatest threat. They were its evolutionary future, the next step in a process that had been unfolding for 50 million years. And as the Guardian fleets dispersed to watch over the inhabited worlds, Zethkar knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The Watchers at the edge of space had finally revealed themselves, and in doing so had ensured that life would continue to grow and flourish under their protection. The age of the hive was over. The age of the Guardians had begun,